to the podcast. On this episode of the Failure Guys podcast, my guest is Stephen Keegan. Stephen, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, Cornell. Great to be here.
Yes, my pleasure to be here. And just to let everybody out there in podcast land know, Stephen and I are members of a Facebook men's group. You've seen two other guests in the past from the CBX Nation. We've known each other online for a few years. Interestingly enough, we live in the same state. And in fact, you're like...
Not far from each other.
Yeah, not far from each other. Have we ever met in real life? Not yet. But soon hope to. Definitely going to do that. So thank you for joining me, Stephen. Glad to have you here. Looking forward to our conversation today. And as I always like to, of course, I know you, but the people out there in podcast land don't. So just say a few things about yourself as we get the conversation started.
Okay, I'm Steve Keegan. I am almost 54-year-old New York City teacher, special ed teacher. I've been teaching for about 15 years now. I think I'm entering my 8th year in the city. Prior to that, I worked at a private school on Long Island, where I live, Nassau County. I have 4 amazing children, and just celebrated my 21st anniversary yesterday.
Wow.
August 30th.
That is great stuff. So how long were you teaching in private school?
I was there for 7 school terms, 2010 through 2017.
Okay. So right off the bat, let me ask you. First of all, I have nothing but praise for the teachers in my life. 2 of the most influential people in my life who were not directly related to me are teachers. One was my 6th grade teacher, who was the one who clued me into the fact that his job was not to teach me. His job was to reveal to me how to learn. And part of that was me getting out of my own way because I was a very precocious student and was a bit full of myself and somewhat temperamental. I had the very bad habit of sometimes correcting him on the rare occasions when I could do so. And the thing that I really commend him for is he pulled me outside of the classroom, and he thought he would have been giving me a dressing down, but he says, "Look, Cornell, I don't have a problem with you doing that because when you're right, you're right. However, you're not the only student in the class. And when you do that, you undermine my authority and my ability to teach the rest of the kids." And I got it.
Yeah, instantly. Yeah.
He didn't talk down to me. He didn't come from protecting his ego. It's like, dude, this ain't the Cornell show.
Right.
Okay? If I was a private tutor, we could roll any kind of way. I got to teach all the rest of them. So you're either with me or against me. What's it going to be? And the second teacher was my high school music teacher, who is a Facebook friend of mine to this day. And his absolute love of music, he inspired you with his love. He wasn't there to teach you to read the notes and bow the strings. I played viola. He just so infused you with the joy of music. And the thing that really irked it and kind of threw a spanner in the works of my end of my high school career was this was in 1974. I'm full disclosure, folks. I'm about 10 years older than Stephen is. This was during the financial crises in the early to mid 70s in New York. And now you can appreciate the perfidy of this as a teacher yourself and working out for the New York City Board of Education. The year after my first year with him would have been his tenure year. So they laid him off for a year. Of course, they rehired him the next year, but as you know, that being laid off for that year, that reset his tenure track. And I went to Stuyvesant High School, so we were all precocious, very smart kids. We knew the politicking behind that, and that was just bad juju, in my opinion. And then to add insult to injury, they replaced him with a gym teacher.
For music.
I knew more about music than the guy standing in front of this. I'm just like,
Sure.
So between that and a sophomore girlfriend who didn't have a first period class, and music was my first period class. So I showed up to school for first period. I just didn't show up to music class. I was on the balcony of the auditorium, and let's just say we were finding extracurricular activities for an hour. But no, that really soured me, especially as a kid, and you're kind of idealistic, and then you see the dirty dealing. It's like, wait a minute, not only
Yeah.
is that just bad form to do to a person, but what do you, how do you value my experience? I thought school was about me, the student.
Hmm.
You're just trying to save money. And I wouldn't even have minded, although
Yeah.
I would have been irked by it, if you replaced him with a qualified teacher.
Right. Someone on par.
Right. But you
Yeah.
replace him with someone who has no qualifications to be standing
Yeah.
in front of the class, which means you just don't care.
Hmm.
And then you hire him back the next year, which means you know you never should have done that to him.
It's a very large system, the city. You see, living in New York City and reading, and as I'm sure you do, and watching the news, local news, you see that, it's very political, whether whoever the mayor is and the
Yeah.
budgets that they
Yeah.
have to put forth annually and the demands from all those city services, at some point, they're going to trim from all services. And usually the educators are on the chopping block
Yeah.
typically, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they don't see the result, what's going to happen with the children,
Right.
the long-term effect. You spoke to that just a second ago.
Yeah.
And sometimes for some kids, you know it you're not going to see the results until much later on,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right.
And I think too, where we were a few years ago in the COVID,
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. The school I was at the time, our principal, I thought she did a fabulous job pivoting to that orientation where everything was remote. Was it perfect? No,
No.
but we did come back. I was home from March, say, to June, the end of that year, that school
Right.
term. I was teaching fourth grade with another co-teacher, and the next year I looped to fifth grade with another co-teacher, and we came to the building from September on. So people were saying,
Mm.
"Oh, you were doing remote." Not really. I was in the classroom
Right.
with the kids that wanted, or the families were
Right.
okay about
Right.
sending them back.
So
And
so like a hybrid model.
exactly, it was hybrid, right? And again, that was not perfect either, but it was a little step up from, kind of doing the remote. We were in the classroom and also doing the Zoom like I'm doing with you now.
Right.
So
Right.
I was very happy the following year where everybody returned.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
was,
I mean, and to your point,
yeah.
it's amazing. First of all, the importance of a good administrator. It's easy
Mm-hmm.
for people to slag on bosses and managers and supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
television and movies, they all tend to be the butt of the joke and the foil of the thing, Office Space and things
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Great movie.
Yeah, yeah, yes. However, as you're saying, because there was no time to prepare for this. The world
Not
shut
at all.
down,
Yeah. I think we
and
have 4 days to prepare
yeah. So
that
what are you
week.
going to do? And I've worked with, as I mentioned, my business mastermind that I'm a member of. We had to pivot because this was a company, is a company based in Orlando, Florida now, that basically did live events, what I call the Tony Robbins kind of thing. You do a
Mm-hmm.
1 to 3 day live event. You're on stage, people are there, and
Mm-hmm.
then somewhere you make your offer, which is your sales pitch to the thing. And if you do it properly, you're gonna make your numbers. All of a sudden, everything's got to go virtual. And as you're saying, with no chance to, it's like, and scene. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
No more physical things.
Yeah.
And I still work with, in fact, today, one of their clients who is an actor, and she has a business that coaches actors how to take charge of their own profession. Making them understand that casting directors and agents are commissioned subcontractors.
Mm-hmm.
They don't work for them. The casting directors and agents work for the actors. If they're not getting me booked, if you're not getting me gigs, then I fire you, and I don't sit here and say, oh, you got any work for me?
Mm-hmm.
So the first virtual event that she did was during the pandemic, and this company, managed that for her.
Mm-hmm.
And this was her 8th year, and she closed over 6 figures of booked business from
Wow.
the second day upsell in an all virtual, and the
All
first time that she's
virtual.
ever done virtual. And
That's
now she
amazing.
pretty much does virtuals, and now
That's it.
she,
Yeah.
so it's amazing. And like this happening right now, as we
Yeah.
discussed before we started the interview, this is my new way of doing the podcast. For those of you who are listening to this on the audio version,
Yeah.
Steve and I are here. He is coming in on a
Hmm.
Zoom, and then I'm using software on my computer to capture his Zoom. I'm capturing myself on a external camera on my laptop, not in the Zoom session. And I'm combining the audio. I'm mixing scenes, cutting back and forth between us. And this is all things that came. Now the software I'm using to record this, I was aware of this for years before the pandemic, but I didn't
Hmm.
really understand it's not super complicated, but it's a bit
Hmm.
involved in order to set it up and make it do what it does. And since I had no real reason to utilize it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like one of the things, you put the tool in your to that weird, socket wrench or that odd tool that you got from your grandfather, and you're like, I don't know what that does, but it looks
Hmm.
interesting. And then during the pandemic, it was like, oh, wait a minute.
That's what I use it for.
That's what I can
Hmm.
do. Open
Hmm.
Broadcast Studio. So I
Hmm.
can create a recording studio on my computer?
Hmm.
Huh. And that made it worth getting inside of the nuts and bolts and learning how it's done. But more importantly, it has allowed me to reach out and connect with people. An interesting
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
2 weekends from now, I will have the first guest on the Failure Guy podcast that is a completely unsolicited guest.
Really
See,
nice.
everyone who's been on here has been someone that I know either personally or professionally, and I've asked them to come on, and they've said yes, and they've come on. But this was someone sent me an email. Actually, this is a gentleman who has a public relations business,
Nice.
and sent a couple of emails from his business
Hmm.
representing other clients he says, you want me to send you their portfolio? It's like, no, send them the link. Tell them to book a gig. What are you talking
Hmm.
about? And then the third was, hey, I've booked a gig. We're on for, I think it's September 15th.
So he
And
had
it's,
listened to one of your podcasts,
yeah,
or found you through that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
he's into public relations. So here's what I figure happened. His job is to get, you know, public relations activity for his clients. One
Hmm.
of the ways to do that is to get them podcast interviews.
Yeah.
So he said, let me find some podcasts that are kind of in the same wheelhouse as what my clients are up to,
Hmm.
and B, kind of new, don't have a lot of episodes, so it would be easy to. Obviously, if he tried to get his clients booked on Joe Rogan, yeah,
Hmm.
good luck with that. First of all, there's a
Yeah.
waiting list. Second of all, you got to be a top tier A-list celebrity.
Exactly.
But
Right.
the Failure Guy podcast, I mean, there's 5 people who've heard of it, and 4 of them are guests.
Wait, I'm
So
not. Wait. I'm not top tier yet. Not
well,
yet.
not until this podcast goes on the air, and then watch how you blow up. So his reaching out, and at first I actually had to Google the clients. I was like, is this some kind of a spam? But no, these clients, I Googled them and looked them
Legit.
up on LinkedIn. They're legit. They're the real deal. So
Nice. That's great.
I was like, yes, please book all and send more. Because I had been doing this on a weekly basis, but I would rather only broadcast when I have a good quality interview than to
Mm.
try to fill up the schedule, you know?
Sure.
And so I just and interestingly, the podcast is called The Failure Guy, where failure is an acronym that stands for first attempts in learning using real experience,
I
you
love
know?
that
Yes.
acronym.
Yeah,
That's something I'm going to take and steal and use this
definitely.
upcoming school year.
Yes, yes.
Most definitely.
So speaking of school, and
Mm.
I'm wearing a T-shirt. This is from when I was living in Queens with my family and my grandnephew, who's going to be 12 years old this coming month. Um, I used to take him to school. I'd walk him to the bus stop in the morning, and there were these dads take our kids to school day.
Mhm.
And at the time, he and his mom, they're not married, but they have got this kid together, and there's some friction between the two of them. So dad wasn't quite in the picture yet.
Yeah,
Full disclosure is in now. Total turnaround.
great.
Amazing. They realized, let's stop fighting each other and let's just co-parent. This is our child. Let's stop being stupid.
There you
So,
go.
so
Totally.
shout out and God bless both of them. So I had the privilege of 2 years in a row of going to these,
Mm.
dads take our kids to school day. And
Mhm.
as I said, the importance of education. Now, you were talking earlier
Mm.
about how, you know, it's all politics. Politics is about the economics, and you got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and usually it seems like education ends up being Peter. You
Mm,
know, now on the short term, I could see yes, if you're talking about first responders or infrastructure, I can see where you'd make the calculus that you could deprioritize education. However, as you and I both know, the future foundation of the civilization we're in is
mm.
built upon education.
Yes,
It is
absolutely.
vital, it is
It's
essential. If you
paramount.
undervalue education, you literally chip away at the mortar and the grout that holds together the
True.
foundation of education. You know,
I agree. I agree
so
with you, Cornell, and
so
I think that's even at a national level, we have a
mm,
presidential election, and one candidate saying he's going to get rid of the Department of
oof,
Education, and whatnot. So, I mean, you know, you have to look at the perspective of what will that do to the end user, which is our
right,
students, and that always should the conversation never seems to go in that direction.
right,
It's always the bureaucrats and the
right.
bloated administration and
Yeah.
bloated greedy teachers through
Yes,
that
and
prism.
people going
So
for an applause line to make teachers the scapegoat. But see, I would
you know,
actually say that the end user, the ultimate end user of education is not the students. The students are the product. The end
mm,
user is society.
right, yeah, that's good to see the
Yeah,
outcome of what we're
yeah,
doing in the
right.
classroom. No, yeah,
Because
definitely.
especially now, I mean, I'm getting
Mm,
ready to this coming month. This is the end of August 2024 as we're making this recording. I'm getting ready to teach a series of 15 classes at SUNY Kingston Center on generative AI. Now, I've always been a little reluctant, and I've been a technology professional this coming year for 32 years, but I've sort of been an AI hater
mm,
because, as I'm sure, well, you're kind of in an earlier grade, but my secondary school teachers, my college teacher colleagues tell me, you got a lot of kids. They're going to AI to write their
mm,
reports for them and all this sort of
mm,
stuff. And
yeah,
plus, as a creative, we remember during the strike that happened during the pandemic. One of the things that the ACT, SAG, and the Directors Guild and the Writers Guild were protesting, rightfully
it's
so.
AI, right?
Yeah,
The
is the
concept,
studios
right?
wanting to
Yeah,
use AI to replace the
yeah.
writers and to even replace the actors themselves.
It's amazing how quickly. I think my first inclination of AI was sometime last year in 23, and just it seems that every day there's something you could read about or watch on the news or CNBC about AI.
Yeah,
And it's amazing, like you said, actors, you can go on X or Twitter, whatever they call themselves, and you can't differentiate if that's a
yeah,
real person.
yeah,
And
and
that's insane. And
it's scary. It's
what
scary.
are the implications, within 5 years time? I
Yeah,
don't know. And even for something that occupation that I have,
yeah,
teaching, you might have a virtual Mr. Keegan in
yeah.
that
It's
classroom, the
kind of
virtual
crazy.
classroom. It
So
really
what
is.
what's kind of turned me around about this, and why I'm mentioning it, my point, and I do have one, is that when because I have a colleague that I met through networking, a Russian woman who has a business that she teaches tech people online, and to the extent that these people can actually get jobs and get placed in the tech industry. So this isn't just
Yeah.
like Udemy or Kajabi or something like that. Um, and she has the contract with the State University of New York, and in meetings she wanted me to engage my services. So her goal is for me to take over the teaching aspect of
Mhm.
things, so she can step back and focus on expanding her business and bring it out. Of course, everyone's recovering from the pandemic. So in looking at this, what I like about this is it's three courses of 5 lessons each, with
Mhm.
different focuses, and the final lesson, excuse me, of each course
Mhm.
is the ethical considerations of AI. Because
Mhm.
resisting AI would be like being back in the early 1900s and resisting the automobile.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
here. Love
Mhm.
it, hate it. You can't. I
Mhm.
can't go to Facebook with the search bar says Meta, and I
Mhm.
open up a document on Google Docs. Like, would you like me to help you write? It's like, no, get the hell out of my
Mhm.
way. I can
Mhm.
write. I'm a writer. Just. But it does have uses if we understand
Mhm.
that it is an amplifier and not a substitute.
Hmm.
You know, and this is the thing that I think we need to, in talking about education, there is no substitution for the creativity of the human mind. There is no substitution for
Agree.
education. And if
Agree.
we don't appreciate the value, because we're moving into this tech focused
Hmm.
AI, so how can we undermine education as the world is moving more and more technological?
Well, I think you have to lean into the empathy side of the
Mm,
personality. AI cannot replicate that.
thank you.
For example, you have a kid that, they had a bad day, or the parents were fighting at home, or whatever the situation is, and you're there just by your mere presence,
Yes.
and you're available to listen to them, or even if they acting out in class,
Yeah.
hey, what's going on? Hey, so and so, hey, Johnny, what's up? And then, you have to be that person to be there for them,
Yes.
and that you're not going to get on an
Yes.
Alexa or
Yeah.
virtual
No.
AI. It's not
No,
happening.
because that's just dealing with facts and numbers and words and concepts. That's not dealing with human emotions. And first of all, like I say, shout out to teachers. I think people who teach are doing God's work. I'm not even exaggerating. And I had the
Thank you.
privilege and pleasure back in 2013 of doing three semesters. I don't know what you'd call them. Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, and the CUNY system, the City University of
Yeah.
New York system, has this program called College for Kids.
Hmm.
And basically, it's an after school and summer program kind of thing. And there are just, lessons, whatever have you, of various things, various sessions. One was on, Minecraft, video game creation.
Hmm.
One was on Microsoft Word for kids, teach them to use a word processor. One was for developing websites. They use the Weebly sort of drag and drop site to build websites, whatever have you.
Nice.
And first of all, a lot of people says, "Oh, you were teaching." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Let's get it straight.
Hmm.
Teaching is a profession and a calling done by qualified professionals. I was an instructor. Okay,
Hmm.
don't ever confuse the two. But I remember you talking about the empathy. There was this one class, and the cohorts were like 7 to 13 year olds. So they're like, I call them my techno tots and tweens.
Hmm.
And this one kid was acting. He was normally a good kid, but he was in a foul mood.
Hmm.
And to the point where he's kind of disturbing the class, and the proctor was having a little problem with him. So I went over, and what had happened was he'd gotten a brand new phone,
Hmm.
and he dropped the phone and cracked the screen.
It's upset about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I sat with him and I says, look, okay, I get it. It's like you can't disturb the class, but I tell you what, because the problem was the proctor was trying to engage him in the
Right.
class, and he just was not feeling it. I says,
Not play.
look, if
Yeah.
you just want to sit here by yourself, that's cool. I get it. Because he was like 11. And I
Hmm.
was like, bro, if
Hmm.
I was 11 and my brand new phone
Well, I'd be
just got
that.
smashed,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. So I was like, no, it's cool. If you just want to sit here quiet by yourself, don't disturb
Yeah.
the class, but I'll tell everybody to leave you alone and you just be chill. If you want to do that for the rest of the class, no problem. Dude, five, ten
Hmm.
minutes later, he was fine. He was back
Yeah.
with the rest of the rooms. Because just let him be in his mind. It's like, man, stop coming at him like an adult.
Right.
He's 11.
Right.
This is
And
emotionally devastating for him.
you said something in regards to that scenario, that you really placed yourself in his shoes,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
that's a essential trait to have when working with kids. We have to remind ourselves, or I do certainly
Hmm.
do. They're not adults, like you just said as well.
Yeah.
Then they're kids. Kids are going to be kids. They're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You have to give them allowances for that, and you almost like you have to shepherd them in the right direction without being
Yes.
very heavy-handed. And you
Yes.
have to recall your experiences. I think I became a teacher later. This is like a second career for me.
Hmm.
So what drew me back was that you know wanting to looking back upon all my experiences growing up as a student, and how it
Yeah.
was for me. Granted, being a student in the 70s and 80s is totally
Mm.
different from
Yes.
now. However, there was some essential grounding characteristics that I think are important, that I like to bring as my into my teaching practices.
Yes. Yes. And that is so true. And I think, when, like you say, when we hear certain politicians talking about, getting rid of the Department of Education, I wish I could
Mm-hmm.
understand the mindset of this vilifying and demonizing teachers. And think about it.
They're just easy targets,
Yeah. And think
Teachers
you're
are
a
easy
parent, you have 4 kids, so you know this.
hmm Yeah,
The school system spends more of your children's waking life with your kids than you do.
yeah, I know.
So if you're going to undercut the people who are the caretakers of your kids, what are you saying? Forget what you think about the teachers. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
What do you think about your children?
Mm,
Because if you don't value the people who are going to spend most of your child's conscious hours shaping let's face it, teachers don't just educate you, they shape your value systems. They shape your concepts of the world. They shape your whole zeitgeist because you're in their
hmm
presence. Well, Mrs. So and so says,
hmm
Mr. Keegan says, na 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 na
hmm
na. That's what's happening at homes, all in your
Oh
student
yeah,
body. You know,
that's right.
and so I say we got to support these people, and like I
Thank
say,
you.
not out of thinking about them, thinking about your kids. If you value your kids, and if you, especially as a politician, if you value the future of America, the future of any nation is its education. If you don't understand that, you're not qualified to do the job. That's just my opinion.
Agree. I totally agree. Should run for office.
Oh no, you know the old joke. If nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve. I will support politicians, but again, just like I'm not a teacher, I'm
Yeah.
not a politician. I'm a public speaker. I'm an advocate for entrepreneurship because it builds community. The name of my business is Commune IT Solutions. Because to me it's the combination of community and IT. And
hmm
and again, like I say, technology is here. So I try to demystify it for people. I don't know nothing about no computers. I say you walk around with one in
Yeah.
your pocket every day. And in fact, the
Right.
most powerful computer that you own is your smartphone.
Right. There's more of technology in this than
Yes,
the lunar lander.
yes,
That's the moon.
yes. In fact, there's more power than that in most people's laptops. If you think
Yes.
about it, it's got a cellular antenna, a Wi-Fi antenna, a Bluetooth antenna, GPS antennas, three accelerometers so it knows the XYZ position axis, and
Right.
it's got a touch screen, and you
It's
can add
amazing.
little programs to it, and it's connected to the internet,
It's crazy. It's crazy.
24/7. Yeah, and it's amazing what we can. So I got into
hmm
when I went independent in 2010 after the subprime mortgage meltdown.
hmm
I decided to focus on small businesses and solo entrepreneurs,
hmm
even though my career had been corporate IT. I started in
Yeah.
'93 at Lehman Brothers, not my fault. Like I say, we set up the infrastructure. What they did with
Yeah.
it, would take no responsibility. Worked for 4 years with Payne Weber during the Y2K conversion. And
hmm
my last full time job was as IT manager for an architectural design firm that had Steven Spielberg, Jerry Seinfeld, Yale University, and the UN as private clients you
Wow.
know. And I used to joke, well, my employers are millionaires and their customers are billionaires, so I won't get laid off unless the entire economy crashes. And then the entire economy crashed. Uh, you know, so they laid me off. I shot my resume around. Every job offering wanted me to do 4 jobs for 80% of one salary, and I was like, you know what?
Mm,
If I got to work that hard, I got to work that hard for myself.
yeah.
And I decided, so what do I want to do? Do I want to just get another job? Do I want to subcontract with bigger businesses? Like, you know what? No, nobody's taking care of the little guy. I was a little guy. I was starting
Yeah.
a business myself, and I saw how challenging that was.
hmm
And I knew the advantage I had was I had almost 20 years of corporate technology experience. So I knew how to use the internet, how to use
hmm
free software, how to use all of the Google suite of tools,
hmm
for myself. But most people who've been in businesses many more years than me, they didn't know how to leverage technology. And the
And
same
there you
thing is
go. The
coming to
connection
mind.
right there. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why going back to the AI thing,
Yeah.
um, that's why I'm so glad I have the opportunity to be an instructor specifically for businesses of how can AI enhance your business and not replace it.
hmm
And similarly, how can AI assist teachers and not replace them? Because if people think that AI is going to replace teachers in a classroom, they are sadly mistaken.
No, I mean they're going to miss out on so it's the human element that's is going to be missing. And these are services like almost like a healthcare service where you have a
Right.
nurse or a doctor. That AI is not going to diagnose, although it probably can, or administer meds, so it's not happening in
Yeah.
it shouldn't happen in that way.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, AI has its future. I
Yeah.
really, myself personally, I don't know where, and certainly the role that I do in the sector I work in, but there's other aspects where it's going to be,
Yeah.
I'm sure, helpful.
Well, the way I look at it, it's like back in the day, and I was watching a YouTube short of this young comedian, and he was jokingly like describing the library experience for Gen Z people. And he was saying, it's like, you used to have to go ask a librarian, and if she didn't know, she gave you a number with like dots in it, and you had to go, and he said, oh, a library is like a house for books. He's like, and then you had to find the book, and you looked in the
Yeah,
book, and if the book didn't have what you were looking for, then you knew a bunch of other stuff. He's, oh, a book is like a
yeah.
slow Kindle, you know. And so I remember back, and I mean, the Dewey Decimal System was
I
my best
remember the
friend.
card catalogs. We'd pull it out of a
Yes,
drawer and look through the
yes,
cards
that was
and have
my.
to write it
So
down. Yeah.
we haven't replaced documented learning, but now we can Google things. Now we can download things in PDF format rather than physical books. But
Yes.
that didn't replace writing. That didn't replace reading. That just made it a little more convenient and
Hmm.
easier to access it. So similarly,
Hmm.
AI is going to augment and enhance things. It's going to amplify the
Yes.
ability of a teacher. Like you remember back in the day when they would have film strips, they would have to
Hmm.
roll the camera into thing, pull down the screen, turn the
I
lights out.
remember. Yes.
Now you just connect your laptop, project the thing,
Right.
but it's
Right on
still the
the screen.
same thing. It's still an instructor. In fact, I remember going back to the College for Kids thing. I
Hmm.
had to sub for this woman who was out one day. She was teaching a science class to these kids. So I didn't know what her curriculum was. And this was like basically the instructors made up the curriculum, which I found a little,
Hmm.
it's like, Kingsborough, you're Kingsborough
Hmm.
Community College. And it's like, well, here's the course description. Here's how many sessions you have. Good luck with that. It's like wait a minute. I have to invent the curriculum. What are you talking about? So I had these kids for an hour. So what I did, they had the projector, so I connected to the laptop, and I showed them the screen. You remember the Red Bull guy that did the dive from 100,000 feet, went up in the
Yeah.
balloon, and so
Hmm.
I showed them how he was in a spacesuit and he was near the top of the atmosphere. It says notice you can see the
Hmm.
curve of the Earth, you can see the dark, and so all the all
Yeah.
the, the, the metrics of his pulse rate, his respiration rate, whatever have you. Of course, as he's going up the kids, what is it with young kids and bodily functions? Well, how does he poop in that? How does it? And I'm like, wow, really, really, we're gonna go there. So anyway, but then we see, he jumps out, and I said, okay, I say, guys, pay attention to that number there. That's his
Yeah.
heartbeat.
Yeah.
And before he jumped out, it was like 88 beats per minute. And then as he's falling, it was like well over 120 beats per minute. I said, now look at his speed. And
Yeah.
I think he
Flying.
topped
Right.
out at like 200 plus miles per hour heading straight down. And I says, now you can't legally drive a car. First of all, you can't drive a car that fast, probably. And you can't legally drive a car that fast on any highway in the United States.
No.
And that's how fast this guy is heading down.
Yeah.
And they were just transfixed with that. And now
Hmm.
I was able to occupy them and engage their interest because I had a
Yeah.
connection to the internet. And if before, if what did the library have a film strip? I'd have to call to the library, get the thing, and just
Yeah.
fill the spool. Hope that the film didn't break. Adjust the
It's
frame.
amazing, like you mentioned, the accessibility to find material to really hook an audience, which is your
Yes,
students, is numerous and
yes,
and all at the keystroke. So
yes.
that's a big game changer for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but
You know.
you've still got to be the one in front of the room,
Hmm.
engaging the audience,
Yes.
monitoring their attention, seeing
Hmm.
whether you hooked them or not. Because a computer
Yeah.
can go, I will play the following film strip. How is it going to know whether the audience is engaged or not? How is it going to tell?
Yeah. You have to really sell it. As a
Yes,
teacher, and show make the connection of how it relates to them, or to the material you're going to teach,
yes,
or are teaching in the middle of.
yes,
So, used to love incorporating movies, and still do,
yeah,
into even if it's not entire movie, just little clips and snippets. And I enjoy incorporating music into my classes.
yes.
From Lin Manuel Miranda's Hamilton.
Mm.
That's a huge one. I grew up in 1776.
Yes,
I mean, and
yes,
then I know July 4th we're off from school, but I always try and at least show some of that,
yes.
with the Continental Congress.
And
And
can you
but
imagine if you would have told me before this that what's going to be one of the best selling musicals on Broadway and it's going to sweep the
Hmm.
Tonys is a
Yeah.
musical about Alexander Hamilton. It's like, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Not
Right.
not a president, not Benjamin Hamilton.
Right.
First of all,
Who
other
is
than the
he?
fact
So
that
it's
he was
like, what?
killed by Aaron Burr in
Burr.
that,
Yeah.
that's all I knew about him.
Remember him from, and he's on the $10 bill, I think.
Oh
$10
yes,
bill.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's in the creativity, and then to do it in this postmodern kind of hip hop, and to
Yeah.
do it
That
like an
was.
opera where most of it is sung,
Hmm.
and it's just like because even most musicals, they're not all music.
Hmm.
They're still mostly book, and then occasionally you come in with the song. So
Right.
just the creativity of coming with that and
Yeah, he was amazing,
engaging.
amazing creation on his part,
Yes.
real talented guy.
Yeah.
So if he's
So,
listening, thank you,
shout
Lin-Manuel
out.
Miranda. Come on to
Definitely.
my school one
Definitely.
day.
And so let me ask you a couple of things.
Yeah,
First of
sure.
all, like a two-part or a related question. So what got you? You say this is a second career, like a late
Hmm.
stage career. So what got you into teaching? And as
Oh
people
boy,
who are watching this can see, you are specifically a special ed teacher.
I am. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so what got you into teaching in general,
Wow.
and what got
Yeah,
you into special ed in specific?
specifically. Well, great question. I finished high school, 35 years ago or so, 88. I'm from a family of 12 children.
Wow.
I'll start preface because it's all going to be relating
Yes.
to where who I am and what I am, right?
Yes.
I'm number 10. My
Mm.
parents, God bless them. I lost my dad 2 years ago.
Oh wow.
He lived till 89. My mom
Okay.
is 90.
Ooh.
She's still doing okay. Um, but they had two girls, two boys. The first
Okay.
four after
And for
they were
most
married.
people, that's a match set. We're good.
Right, we're done. Not them. Then they had I think it was five girls out in between me.
Mm.
One brother that didn't survive for too many days. I guess two before me, but I have a brother and sister younger than me as well.
Okay.
So I think there's a 19-year span from oldest to youngest in my family.
Wow.
Now, a number of them are teachers,
Oh.
and I think let's go back to my college years. I wanted to go to St. John's four-year
Okay.
college.
Yeah.
My father, being the wise man that he was, and the accountant really that was his career. He was
Okay.
worked at Brooklyn Botanic Gardens
Oh, nice.
in
Beautiful
later years
place.
of his
Beautiful
career.
place,
He
by
was
the way.
ran the financial CFO there
Okay.
basically, and budgeting and all that. But he also managed the household budget along with mom very well. So I did 2 years community college local, and
Okay.
then I had the option to stay here for the remaining 2 years of your bachelor's, and this was towards a business type of career, marketing, whatever.
Right.
I really wanted advertising because I always thought I had really creative streak, and I like the artistic stuff side of things.
Okay.
So then I ended up after 2 years. I had one sister married, moved with her husband out to Arizona,
Oh.
and I moved out there in '90 to finish my studies, college studies at Arizona State University.
Ah.
And it was good experience for me because I was able to go away from the collective, so to speak, and away from my family and do something on my own. Within the
Mm.
first year I was there, my sister's husband had a promotion and they moved to Northern California.
Oh.
So I was basically on my own, and after the first year of living on campus, I got an apartment. I was working
Oh.
on campus, making money, blah blah blah, finishing school,
Okay.
and just having the time of my life. You're 19, 20, 21,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
and the weather was so fine. I'd hear,
Whew.
oh, it's a snowstorm in February. I'm out in the sun, just working on color, and just having the time of my life,
Happy
and it was
winter.
great.
Wish you were here.
Yeah, but over the time, I'd have another niece born, a nephew born. Several
Mm.
of them are now parents themselves. I was an
Yes.
uncle at
Wow.
14, 15 years of age. But I think it was just kind of I graduated just as Clinton was elected. We were coming
Okay.
off of kind of a recession, and with Bush won,
Yeah.
so the jobs in the field really weren't pretty strong. The economy wasn't what it is today out there,
Right.
and it was a bit of a long distance to travel and get home and see people and blah blah blah. So my dad was always like, take some more classes after bachelor's, but I did it. I wanted to try and
Hmm.
work.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
never took advantage of that. But so I came home, I started to work. I worked for Marriott on
Oh,
campus at school. They ran all the food services. I did
right.
catering, that sort of stuff, and essentially to pay for a meal for 2 years of college.
And it
But
wasn't just chips and Mountain Dew.
no, I'd have chicken franchise and
Ooh.
vegetables, mashed potatoes, all that good stuff. And also it was very social. There's a lot of
Yeah.
friends and pals around there. But one thing about that area is everybody moves from someplace else.
Right.
Me from New York. I met students from Africa, from Malaysia, from
Wow.
Californians, Chicagoans, all these people. So it
Okay.
was a great experience for me to go to that school and meet the people I met and have those experiences, good, bad, or otherwise.
Right.
And they help shape and form you. So yeah, ultimately I came back here in '94 and started working because obviously that's expected of you. I looked for some
Right.
work. I temped once in the city, but then I Marriott. I went back to them in a hospital setting, and they worked just managing the food services and procurement and all these cafeteria for the staff, those type of things.
Right.
And I kind of did it for a while. I was home, transferred to another hospital on Long Island, closer to home, and I was there for about 10 years, and I did everything there.
Hmm.
But I think part of it was like you're at that stage now where you have bosses that are higher that come in, like, what's this guy doing? He's been here too long. We want him to move along or
Hmm.
advance him up. But
Yeah.
I was always reluctant because I didn't really want to get locked into that place. There was always like
Right.
I dabbled, maybe take HTML coding class, back
Right.
in the early
Right.
2000s, to keep the experiences going.
Yeah.
And so I was married at this point in 2005, and it was like, if I don't do this now, my wife was pregnant with our first oldest
Hmm.
boy, Joseph. She hadn't given birth yet. Let me go back to school for education and see what it's like.
Okay.
And you go to these family parties, and all the educators be off to one side of the room, kibitzen. Not that I felt out of place, but
Yeah.
I
But they
wasn't
had their
privy
own
to.
little cabal
It
of
was mostly like this little subculture, so to
yeah.
speak. Yeah,
Yeah.
but so that was part of it. Part of it too is really, like I mentioned earlier, you're reflecting on how you were raised and your own experiences at school. My mother and father put us all through our local Catholic parish school,
Hmm.
elementary, that is.
Okay.
One through eight. Then they had a K kindergarten. So when we hit first grade, we all went to the school. So all of us graduated from it. The school's closed now,
Hmm.
but that really kind of shaped, I think, our education. There were very good teachers there,
Yes.
but the
Yes.
but the best teacher was when we get home in the afternoon, and mom was there. We're very fortunate. My
Right.
mom stayed home. My dad
Wow.
did this all on one income,
Oh my
and
gosh, that
and
is
I
that is outstanding. That's crazy.
I don't know. But again, he never had like the newest car. He never. I mean, we took vacations, but they were like kind of day trips, or he took the kids to Washington. I
Yeah.
was left home because I was too small. You know what I mean? So,
Right, right,
you
right.
know, his vacations came when you know, when he was retired and he got to travel. And he has a
Right.
son working for Marriott that got a great hotel deal. And
Okay, but hey, hey,
one of his daughters
perks.
works for an airline and got the airline tickets. So
Sweet. Well, see, there you go. There you go.
perfect,
The
right?
blessings. My mom used to say the arrows in your quiver. You know.
Right. And you know what? He was a great man, my dad, and I, as more that I live and be a father myself, you draw
Yes.
back on how he raised you, and he was never heavy-handed, in terms
Mm.
of like, never.
Mm.
He was very
Okay.
calm. He
Okay.
was never judgmental. If any one of us had troubles, which was very few times, he would never tell, oh, you're awful, you're terrible, and
Right.
never, and yeah, you miss him to this day. I mean, I think part of that's the impetus to get what I was doing with
Yeah.
CBS a few years
Yeah.
ago, is because I wanted to maintain my health as I got older. Something that he was
Yes.
an athletic guy. He played basketball at St. Francis College in Brooklyn, which no longer has a basketball program.
Wow.
But his knees were kind of bad. And, over time you gain weight. And he was busy
Yeah.
with living his life and taking care of his family and coming home. And he volunteers time in the evenings to coach a lot of my sisters in basketball when I
Okay.
was just a little guy, and or be at our games, hanging out in the outfield because I don't think he ever wanted to mix in with a lot of people as far as like the parents and all that, So
Right,
he just
right.
kind of chilled out in the
Kept to
outfield.
himself, kept to himself.
Exactly. So,
Yeah,
but that was a different generation,
yeah.
and he was in between the boomers and the guys that fought World War II. So he was like the '50s
Mm,
kids, my mom
okay,
and dad. So
okay.
there's a
I
great
think they
book.
call them the silent generation.
They do, yeah. There's a great book, Generations, that categorized all those generations, including ours and stuff. But I was fortunate too. I said we come home from our day at school and we would do our homework. And I was very fortunate because we had some good friends on our block where we grew up who woman had raised her kids and they were all out of the house at this point. So he would come down and have tea with my mother while she was
Ah,
doing some type of task or prepping dinner or whatever.
mm,
And I would learn stuff from Mrs. Kane's lap. She would tell stories. Her brother
mm.
learned a lot about World War II because her husband fought over there in Sicily's invasion. Her brother
Wow.
died in Belgium, Battle of the Bulge. She's buried over there. So she was always like very encouraging. She'd help us with our homework too. So, that's like somewhat of a community aspect, so to speak. Somebody was there as well as your mother. So that was always grounding for us. And you know, um, I think a lot of the Gen X experiences too, growing up. We also had time where we get on our bikes and just disappear, and as long as you were home at six
Yes,
o'clock,
yes. Street light rule. Street light rule.
yeah. I mean, my brother worked at a gas station, so I would like go park the bike there, not
Right.
far from my house, and then next door was a Nathan's, which had the video games with popular coin ops.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
And
Oh
I
my
had a
goodness.
paper
Many,
route
many
and
a
make
quarter.
money.
I
Yeah,
guess it was like the childhood version of the one-armed bandit.
yeah, it was. I pole position, asteroids, all these games.
Oh
Pac
my
Man was big,
gosh. Taking me back.
and then there was a mall nearby too where I got a part time job while I was in high school, supermarket, and which, believe it or not, they had our public library in the basement of this mall,
Wow.
which is weird.
This is
So my mom would usually shop
unusual
there
location.
Fridays, and
Yeah.
I go to the library, or they had like another arcade there. They had a comic book store. I get all that stuff, all that good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
as far as
Okay.
education, it was definitely there. And I had in high school, I volunteered because I did go to Catholic high school. I did somewhat to public school in my family, but you know, I volunteered teaching religious instruction
Okay.
for 2 years in a row out of the parish that I went to elementary school. But when you finish high school, you finish college, it's the last thing I think anyone, at least I was thinking of, is to go back into a classroom and be a teacher.
Right.
But
Right.
the signs were always there, and
Yeah.
I know I've kind of been rambling a little bit. In college, when I was at ASU, part of my job, I worked at the staff dining room, basically, with a roommate of mine, and
Yeah.
this woman Lucy was so sweet. She's so funny too, and she called her four employees her kids, and
Mm.
a couple had Down syndrome,
Okay.
different developmental disabilities, whatnot. But they were very involved. They did their jobs, and they were very a lot of satisfaction from doing that. And I was working with them. I was a
Yes.
teammate with them. So that was one aspect of you know wanting that special ed inclination or moving towards that.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you look on all the other ones after that. Just in terms of some brothers and sisters. One sister had played softball on her um, jobs team, co-ed,
Right.
and one of the persons on the team had a son who was, I think, had muscular dystrophy, and
Mm.
he'd go to the games. And one time we went out after the game, hanging out. I was hanging out with him. So I mean, I think that sensibility was always there because you know, a special ed, you have to have that sort of temperament. You have to look at
Right.
people not at the disability, but as a
Right.
human being.
Right.
And I certainly, I believe I have done that and can continue to do that.
Okay.
So,
So it's like it's the context of your life. You have a
mm-hmm,
number of siblings who are educators. You yourself had a pretty excellent education, and you did some volunteering during your school bringing, and then being with the population. I just have to say,
Yeah.
one of the best jobs I ever had in my life and a pivotal experience for me was when I was 17 and a half. I worked at a camp in upstate New York in Saugerties.
Mm,
For what we would now call developmentally challenged. Back then, we just called them mentally retarded because that
yeah.
was the phrase. No insult intended. That was just the terminology at the time.
Right.
And it was a sleepaway camp. So for 2 months, I was just up there out in the woods. And let me tell you something.
Mm,
It is one of the best jobs I ever had in my life.
yeah.
That population is so there's no guile.
Hmm.
They're who they are, and
Right.
they're so loving. It's like if you took a normal person, quote unquote,
Hmm.
and stripped away all the BS and the
Hmm.
nonsense and the masking and the social gaming that we do to keep up, and then if you're just your raw self,
Yes.
that's what it
Authentic
was.
self.
Yes,
Yeah.
and just so amazing. And I also met a guy up there who was from, the Jersey Shore, who somehow talked me into becoming a bass player. And that's what I did in my 20s. I went down to Jersey Shore and chased my rock and roll dreams. As you can tell by the videos of mine, you've never seen how well that went, but it was really transformational in my life.
Yeah.
And this was a camp that was started. It was called Camp Arlen, and it was then offsite there was the Arlene Training Center because the daughter of the woman who found it was in this population. And,
Hmm.
she just, at the time, this is 1978, she didn't find any quality education, particularly, summer camp, experiential things like that. She says, well, I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
And it was just so great. So working with that population, and when I was in high school, I think in junior year, I worked at Catholic Charities. Speaking of Catholic Charities, I didn't go to Catholic school,
Mm,
but I was raised in the Catholic Church, surprisingly enough, especially
mm,
since my mom's a Southern Baptist, so figure that one
mhm,
out.
mhm.
And I worked for 2 years with deaf children,
Uh-huh.
very, very young, like kindergarten and very early. And I had a relationship with this one kid, Eric Reese. I'll remember his name to this day. And got to know him and his family would even to the point where they would stop by and visit the house sometime. And my mom had one of those little statuettes, the lover's embrace, with the
Mhm,
man behind the woman with his arms around her. And of course, he's a little 6-year-old, and
mhm,
there's breasts. So of
mhm.
course he's fascinated by this. He's
Right.
going over and he wants to touch them, and the mom is
Uh-huh.
telling him, "Hey, hey, don't do that." So he turns away from her because he wasn't wearing hearing aids, but he could read lips.
Mhm.
But if I'm not looking at you, I can't hear what you're saying. You can't tell me anything because I can't see.
Right.
And I'm looking at him like, that little so and so. And the mom, she says, yeah, he does that. So, handicap?
Yeah.
Because I was flabbergasted. I was like, because I looked at the mom, I was like, she says, no, yeah, he knows what he's doing.
He knows.
And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, wow. So, this, and I guess I just say that to say we have a tendency to have a sense of pity or sorrow for people. People are just
Right.
development, and that's why I think I like the
Yeah.
term now, developmentally different or differently abled, rather
Or
than, I mean,
neurodivergent. That's another
neurodivergent.
one.
Actually, that's really, I think, the
Yeah.
best the best
I
way of
think
putting it.
like I past year I did a my school started a new classroom with autistic students. So,
Mm,
I kind of circled back to the first 7 years of my teaching, where it included autistic students and included guys developmentally disabled in wheelchairs or at one time hard of deaf
right,
or visually disabled.
right,
Run the gamut.
right.
So it was nice. It was a small class size. Got to know these guys really well and their families, and just a great experience to come back so to see it
Yes,
again.
yes,
Um, and these boys had such a exceptionalities in terms of like how they viewed the world or saw the world.
yes.
One boy was twice exceptional where he could play music with
Mm,
keyboards, with just without any formal training, from my
wow.
understanding. And he's playing like Ode to Joy from Beethoven. It's
Woo.
just phenomenal. So like the first week of classroom last year, I brought a keyboard that my kids really weren't using, that they got from a
Mm,
cousin. And I used
okay.
it in the classroom all year long, and he would go on it and play. And, he needed to play to regulate himself, go for it, or for that
Right.
matter, all the kids in my room. I had other boys that were have such interest in transportation, trains and buses. They would draw these amazing
Wow.
sketches of the trains and the buses. They could
Wow.
probably tell me the schedules and which one goes here, which one goes
Right.
to, the
Right.
Q 75, whatever it is,
Right.
45, 38, 28, whatever. So
Yeah.
that I
Okay.
embraced that. I made the whole classroom, the buckets I had for their backpacks in the morning. I just got the subway like on my mug here.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
so
Oh
their
my gosh.
initial was A. They'd have the A on their bucket. So you know
Okay.
I would tailor that to their interests. And the
Okay.
boy who played the music, I would sing "A Man in the Mirror." That was a popular song
Oh,
that he liked,
okay.
and he and I would
Yeah.
go back and forth, and then sing it just
Mm.
and that's
Right.
the I just enjoyed singing with them, and
Yes. Yes.
just to kind of get them grounded, that was
That is
so I think
wonderful. That is
important.
wonderful.
So
And back to our conversation about AI, those are the aspects that artificial intelligence can't replace.
there we
Nor
go.
should
Right.
it be trying. Like as I'm preparing to teach these courses, I was talking with a friend of mine saying, here's what got me over being an AI hater is the way I look at it, the human mind and intelligence is always going to be the light source. And we've all curious kids. We all did the thing. You get the magnifying glass, you focus the sun on a little piece of paper, you can burn a hole in it. So
Right.
to me, AI is a lens, okay, and it can
Yeah.
focus our creative potential. But you
Mhm.
put a lens in the dark, and there's nothing because there's no light beams going through it for it to
Through it.
focus.
True.
And as you know, you studied a little technology, you know the term GIGO, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Yeah.
You only
Yeah.
get out of artificial intelligence
Yeah.
what you put into it. So it of itself is not going to do anything. It's just
Yeah.
algorithmic thinking. As a friend of mine who's went to the same high school as me but graduated a few years earlier, we had lunch a couple of weeks ago, and he says AI is basically autocomplete on steroids.
Hmm.
That's really what it does. It goes out, it analyzes the whole totality of the internet, and then it tries to guess based on what you
Hmm.
asked it. What's the next word? What's the next word? What's the next
Right.
word? So it's not creating anything. It's synthesizing from the sum total of what's out there to be understood. Now,
Right.
before we close, since this is a podcast called The
Oh
Failure Guy, and somehow
boy.
you had mentioned
Yeah. Yeah.
in the notes that because
Yeah.
folks, I have my guests fill out a form, and I just ask them a few questions in the form. You mentioned
Yes.
that there was an incident. First of all, shout outs to your dad. And
Yes.
fathers
Yeah.
are very important. I mean, parents are very important. Fathers,
No
mothers, of
question.
course. I mentioned many times I love my mom. She passed in February of 2021, and I always have a picture of her. This is her. I always keep her picture near me, you know, to keep her on my mind. But you mentioned that your
Yeah.
dad, God bless him, was not an overbearing sort, which is interesting given the generation he was raised in. It would have been typical to be that. And you mentioned in the notes that there was an incident. You sort of found yourself in a little bit of trouble while you were at college, and your dad
Yeah.
was first only concerned that you were okay, and you said
Yes.
non-judgmental and
Yep.
supportive as the situation was resolved. So if you could say a
Yes.
little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to go into too
Yeah,
much
yeah.
detail. It's many years, but suffice to say, I probably had a little too much of an adult beverage at a
Okay.
particular darkened tavern of some sort. That's enough to say. And
Yeah, yeah, and then we can
I
we
was
can
shown the
fill in.
door quite along with another buddy who was there, and pretty
Yeah.
violently shown the door. Enough said. And
Yes.
I was on a Friday night. I remember that. But I think at the time I was already 23, right? I was
Mm,
already out of school.
right.
I was having maybe too much fun in my life. In
Like I said,
retrospect,
out on your own, making money.
right?
Yeah.
Very minimal overhead,
Yeah.
basically.
Oversight. Yeah.
And again, I was living with guys too that were kind of
Ah.
not directionless too, somewhat. They had
Yeah.
direction, but they were all in different
Yeah.
stages. It was, I would say failure to launch, but we were kind of at the 10, 9, 7, 6 stage,
Yeah.
so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
So anyway, that evening, those guys, in fact, unfortunately weren't with me. I was with some work friends, which those guys
Mm.
probably would have kept maybe a closer eye on me.
Right. Right. Right.
However, you know, needless to say, I was spent the night in a place I never will go back to
Oh,
again.
you've been there,
And
done
then
that.
yeah, and then the next morning, like you're like groggy, like what the F happened,
Yes.
And I went home, and it was such a long weekend because I'm like, you're miserable. You're like, what
Yeah.
the hell? You got to do this on such and such date, go back, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And, you know, it turns out it was basically nothing.
Yeah.
It's,
But in the moment, you
it's
don't know
terrible.
that. You don't have no history of this, and it's just
Right.
like then you're beating yourself up and kicking yourself in the butt. Like, how did I?
Yeah. And then
Come on.
they're talking like, oh, do I have to like, you know, get a lawyer or something like that? So you like, you want to cover your ass. So you make that phone call to your
Yeah.
father, maybe 2 days later or so, because you got to go back in like 10 days for you don't know what,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I mentioned that, and almost to honor my father in a way, two
Yes.
years after his passing, which was the 2 years this month. He was. I called him at his job, and
Mm.
nowadays my kid's constantly texting and calling.
Yeah.
We would never call him at his work. But
Right.
had the conversation, and he didn't say anything like "What the hell you were doing?" Blah 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 blah. Just like, "Are you
Yeah.
all right? If you're okay?" I maybe my knee was a little bruised or sore.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, but
Oh, you
you
got the
know,
bum rush, huh? Okay.
I did. Yeah, but so anyway, he's like, all right, well, if you want to see somebody, go talk to a lawyer, whatever. And then he explained it to me, because
Yeah.
this happens. I was living in um, near a college campus of 40,000, 50,000 probably now.
Wow.
But these things would happen
Oh yeah.
routinely,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And, here's a good guy who's never had trouble in his life.
Yes.
You're like, what the hell? You're like, you think
Yeah.
you're like some villain or something,
Exactly. Because
But,
you don't know inside of it subjectively. You feel like a piece of crap
yes,
and dumb, and then you come from better stock than this. What am I doing? What's
right,
Dad gonna
right,
think when he hears about this? Yada yada yada.
right. He's gonna,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it turned out fine, and it's sort of crystallized. Maybe it's time to go home and settle yourself a little more and get
Yeah.
on with your
Yeah.
what you're supposed to be getting on
Yeah,
with.
and
That's
it's
the
funny you talk about the
yeah,
college experience. I told you I spent my 20s in on the Jersey Shore,
yeah.
and at Wednesday nights there was this bar in Long Branch where we used to have an open mic, and next
Yeah.
to it was the bar that was the hangout bar of the local 4-year college.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And if you stay till closing, you could stand in the parking lot across the street, and I sometimes would do this almost like a bar bet. You could say, okay, hey, see that bar over there?
Hmm.
In the next 5 minutes, two guys are going to come out of there. And before they get across the street, they're going to get in the dust up.
Mm.
And
You'd call
like
it.
clockwork, and
Yeah.
it was usually guys who knew each other,
Hmm.
who came there together, spent the night drinking,
Hmm.
and somebody said something that one thought was a joke, the other one didn't. Somebody said
Yeah.
something to somebody's girlfriend, whatever have you. Next thing you know, and then again, no real,
Chaos.
more
Yeah.
almost more like a slap fight. And then I guarantee you, these guys the next day are going to wake up a little banged up and bruised and say, oh,
Hmm.
"Must have had a pretty good time last night." So I remember I moved down to Jersey when I was 23, and I stayed there till I was 32. And of course, I thought, oh my God, I'm on my own and I'm going to go and chase my
Hmm.
dreams and pursue my destiny.
Right. Conquer the world. Right.
Yes. And like I said, I was 23 years old. I thought I knew all the answers. And by the time I was 25, I realized I didn't even know what the questions were. In fact, for my 29th birthday, I made up a t shirt for myself that said, the first 30 years are basic training.
Mm.
And to all my friends who are parents, because I'm 63, so a lot of my friends are grandparents nowadays. But the ones who are going through that, the tween to early adulthood years, when you first of all, I call those the dumbass years.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
say, look, that's
They are.
just yes, like you went through it, I went through it, we went through it. And I'm saying to the parents, like, you know what I'm talking about. You're a
Mm.
dumbass. You don't know. You think you know, you don't know. Whatever. They'll get over it. You know.
Mm.
And it's just like I have this sort of joke I put. I look at life as a series of three sets of 30 years, each of which I identify with a sound. Like the first 30 years, from 0 to 30, the sound is, huh? And then from 30 to 60, the sound is, oh.
Mm.
And finally, if you're lucky enough, from 60 to 90, it's like, ah. So I am just at the beginning of that
The cusp, yeah.
the cusp of the
That,
last set
that
of
alert.
30, and I'm like, I not only
Mm-hmm.
understand it,
Yeah,
but I get it. And you shared a lot of context. I think that's important that we are not just the sum total of what we've experienced, we are steeped in the context of who we are. And you're an
yeah,
educator because you had quality educators in your life, and because in
yeah.
your life you had siblings who
Hmm.
themselves were educators. So you saw the calling, the tradition, that because, let's face it, a lot of people, teachers are overworked, they're underpaid, the kids are hell, and whatever. And why would you want to stand in front of a classroom? But you got to see it like from inside baseball kind of thing, to
Hmm.
see the good parts and why you'd want to do it, and then being exposed to the population that you focus in as a special ed teacher. You got to see the beauty and why they would need a compassion. You started at the beginning of this talking about,
Hmm.
and interesting that it ties in with AI. And again, none of this was pre-planned. We didn't know how this
No,
conversation was going to go.
we just kind of went with AI.
Yes, but the importance of empathy and
Hmm.
compassion. And so,
Yeah.
in closing, it just share a little bit about that in the context, and how important it is to not only have good and qualified teachers, but compassionate and empathetic teachers.
Well, I think, that's, I think I view it as an essential quality. You have to have some empathy for the students that you're teaching, even if they're giving you the hardest time, or you hear colleagues say, oh, that so and so is miserable, blah, blah, whatever, or his parents, blah, blah. You got to check yourself, and not
Mm,
subscribe to what others think. And, I think, at least I've seen, and maybe it's because of social media and how teachers out there seems to be a lot of demand for the special ed teachers. I
mm,
see. Oh, I have an opening here, I have an opening there. Well, then ask yourself, why is that? Why aren't people approaching that for careers? Well, we discussed a little bit about that as far as like politicians and
yeah,
teachers are the marked person, right?
yeah,
But I think with any occupation, we're living in this time in society where everything's called into question. Those
yes,
esteemed professions, even doctors, lawyers,
yes,
right? They're
yes,
getting they're
yes.
getting it too.
I mean, so
So
much anti-science during the whole COVID thing, and
right,
and and even questioning, did we land on the moon,
right.
and all
The
this kind of
conspiracy
nonsense.
theories,
Flat Earth theory. I mean, come on.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, those there's targets everywhere, and I think you have to. It's like the keep it simple principle. Keep it simple,
Hmm.
stupid. KISS principle.
Yeah.
You got to just go to the core of what you're doing, and what is that? It's just being present for your students.
Hmm.
It's being listening in a non-judgmental way, and it ties
Yes.
back into how I was learned from my best teachers, my mother and father, and
Yes.
and they even I go over to my mom's, I'd have dinner with her Friday nights during the school year because all my siblings we spend a day part, the ones that work from home who have that ability, or the one teachers come in the evenings or on the weekends, whatever. So there's always somebody at home with my mom, and
Nice.
I just treasure. She's so interested in what my day's like and how's school going, or have you been working out? If she doesn't see those dopey posts that I make about workouts, just asking me. But just asking me, are you exercising? Are you walking,
Yes.
running, whatever. So that's
Yes.
something that is in my core now because I was raised by those two people,
Right.
and that's good. That's in my DNA, and that's something I take, and I'll take next week when I return and I meet my class, the kids that I'm going to teach
Yes.
this upcoming year, and
Yes.
that's not going to change. So,
Yes.
and again, I've said this before. You the best lessons that I've learned. I've shared this with my students are those times I've made mistakes, times I
Mm.
failed. Like high school, I raised my hand. I had a none. History. I loved history. Social studies was my top class, and I thought I had the answer. I raised it so quick. He calls me wrong, and the class cracks up. And I have one classmate called me a choker. You choke. You choke. So it's just funny.
But I
And
bet I bet you'll never forget what the right answer was.
yeah, I wish I could remember the question.
Well, right. Of course, if you can even remember the context. Now, it's in closing. I'd just like to say you mentioned that some teachers. Oh, that kid, that troubled kid, that problematic kid, that so and so, and the parents or whatever have you. And again, like yourself, is my first teacher, my mentor, my best friend, my constant advisor was my mom, and the importance of what you have at home. And it seems to me the importance of a compassionate, engaged, and empathetic teacher is that there's a lot of kids, as you know, because you're in the classroom with them,
Hmm.
they don't have this foundation at home.
Yeah.
And for some of them, the only way they're going to get this is in that
Yeah.
classroom with you. And
Yeah.
this is, as we said, and I think it's a fitting place to wrap up our conversation. I really want
Mm.
people out there in the listening audience to appreciate this, that that's the value of quality education. It's not just the facts and figures. It's not just reading, writing, and
Hmm.
arithmetic.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
classroom is such an important environment for
Hmm.
raising human beings to be, as you know, the liberal arts. Now that's an undervalued, that's a non-specific trait. That's like the lowest level. But the concept originally in the classical Greek thought was that liberal arts was that a well-rounded citizen
Yes.
should be familiar with all of the basic disciplines of
Hmm.
learning, some math, some literature, some art, some music, some science,
Hmm.
whatever have you. And that was the point of having a broad based, well rounded education.
And you
Not
know
just,
what? You. I'm sorry to cut you off, Cornell.
no, no,
Um, what that will lead to, like you said, with the well-rounded person, is that it's a pathway for lifelong learning.
thank
You
you.
know, I say to my kids, students, I'm 53, but I'm still learning every day.
Yes,
You know, learning
yes,
something new about how you teach a sixth grade math lesson, a particular topic,
yes,
or just get interested in art and going to museums when you have the opportunity to
yes,
go, and
yes,
just
yes, yes,
enriching
yes,
yourself
yes.
and be, well versed and read. Unfortunately, my wife brings the newspapers home from her job. So I'll bring the
Ah,
Times, I'll stack Times up and I'll bring them into the classroom. I always looking for something I could expose the kids
right,
to, that you never
right.
know where it might, take them. And,
Yes.
just quickly to back up, I know time's running out,
No,
but
no, no.
my father was very big on, and when he was retired and at home and seeing grandchildren, he had like 31 grandchildren. And
Wow.
I impressed upon my kids, you go over to grandma's, grandpa's, you don't just run in and start playing or whatever. You have to say, go to him,
Yes,
hi grandpa. That's all he wanted, was like hello, acknowledgement, right?
yes.
So those social niceties my dad was very big on. And I would
Mm.
get so, even to this day with my children, whenever they go to publicly, oh, your kids are so well behaved, they're so,
Mm.
they're so respectful, this and that.
Mm.
But that's like, that
That,
shouldn't all
yeah,
kids be like that?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's something that came from him, and I've passed on to my kids. And they can come here, and I'm in my son's room, and I rarely have come up here. But like when I had them younger, the three older kids that I have, they could be maniacs here, but as long as they went out in public, they were
Right, right,
fine.
right, right. Be hellions at home, but be well
Right.
disciplined out there in the street. And
And
my
they know
my
that.
yes, my folks are from South Carolina. In fact, my siblings and I were the first generation raised north of the Mason-Dixon line, and so it was always, you when you go, and in fact, when we would go visit our grandparents in the summer. If we walked around the block, you had to hail. That's what they call it. You
Mhm.
had to hail if someone's grandma, some little lady was sitting out there, and you didn't say
Yeah.
hello, good morning, how are you? You know about it by the time you got home because
Mhm.
everybody knew whose grandbaby you were. It's
Right.
like you passed Mrs. So and so, and you didn't say hello. Boy, we raised you better than that.
Hmm.
And that culture. And I have a good friend who I met when I went independent, and I didn't know this, but I could tell. I came when I first met her and visited her at home and her kids, and they called me Mr. Cornell. Hello, Mr. Cornell. And I was like, wow, that's very Southern. She's like, well, yeah, my folks are from South Carolina. I was like, okay, I knew it. But I don't think it's
Hmm.
specific to a region. I think it's just a certain way, it's a certain cultural thing. And
Yeah.
it's in like the 90s, the cultural zeitgeist was the snarky, Seinfeldian kind of wise
Yes.
ass, wise
Yeah.
cracking so and so and so. And that sort of became sort of celebrated in ours. Like, look, I like a George Carlin or what's it, Bill Burr as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I say, there's reason that like I say, that's why old sayings and old traditions get old because they're valuable. Like I say, in the
Hmm.
contrast between, we're here now, you're talking about the upcoming election, and there's this enmity between the left and the right and the
Yeah.
progressive and the conservative. When I was living in Jersey, I had the privilege of writing a op-ed political column for an Asbury Park newspaper for 5 years. And I remember I wrote this one article where I was talking about that, and I says if we use the metaphor of the bird, because we're talking about wings, if you think about it, all of the vital organs, the heart, the brain, the lungs, are in the center.
Hmm.
And like a bird, without both wings, flight is impossible. The
Yes, true.
conservative, the best about it, and especially people, I would say I'm more progressive than conservative, but like the old Winston Churchill thing, if a man is not a liberal in his 20s, he has no heart, and if he's not a conservative in his 40s, he has no intelligence.
Hmm.
The conservative mindset is preserving that which deserves to be preserved. The traditions that stood the test of time, they're the foundations of our society. But we don't want to get stuck in the way. That's the way we've always done it. Well, once upon a time we were racist. Once upon a time we were sexist. Once upon
Hmm.
a time we were xenophobic. Those aren't good things. Those are things of the past that we
Right,
should let go of. Now, the
right.
progressive mindset is saying, let's look for the change that's come. Let's not stay stuck on tradition or slaves to the status quo. However, change just for the sake of change is a little too much. We don't want to get
Hmm.
overly permissive. I mean, I
Yeah.
grew up in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, and, I was,
Hmm.
probably the last of the pre-AIDS generation to go out there and wing it and fling it. But I don't resent the fact that I was a virgin until I was 21. I
Hmm.
don't resent the fact that I have not had a whole lot of lovers in my life. I've also never had anything I needed to get a shot or an injection for, because, I've never been married. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm an old-fashioned traditionalist like that. However,
Right.
we don't want to go so far off the rails that we get derailed. So
Sure.
we need that
Any
balance.
extreme on either
Yes,
side
yes,
is not healthy. You know,
exactly.
extreme eating, right?
Yes,
Extreme dieting. What's that
yes,
going to lead you, right?
yes,
So,
exactly.
I think what you're suggesting is some type of balance,
Yes,
and that's the elusive elusiveness of that is
yeah,
something that everyone struggles with,
yeah,
including yours truly. At times. So it's again, that's why I love that group we're involved in because
yes,
I could
yes,
always draw back on, oh, all right, that's mindset.
yes. There
Let's
you
think
go.
about how to set my mind
Yes,
for the day or for that particular moment, so we're ready
yes,
to avoid
yes,
those extremes.
yes,
And that's as a teacher, I have to do that too during the school day.
yes,
Or if any career I would have had, or in that parallel universe, I'm sure I'd have to have that refocusing at times, and
yes,
that's important. So that's
yes.
mindset right then and there. You know.
Definitely. And I always look at balance. I used to, when I was younger, look at balance as like standing upright on the
Yeah.
sidewalk and not falling.
Yeah.
But as I got older, it's like, no, balance is like walking a tightrope. Is you're always negotiating balance at every second. Just because I'm
Yeah.
balanced right now doesn't mean that 2 seconds from now I'll still be balanced. I've
Hmm.
always got to, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm balanced right now. Oh
Hmm.
no, not so. Okay, okay, okay. And I've always got to be mindful of balance, not just
Right.
because I'm balanced right now and then I'm done. I don't have to pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, so wait, you mean for the rest of my life? Well, yeah, for the rest of my life. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing dynamic.
It is. It's
And
always going to be. And I like also the Bruce Lee. Be like water.
water, yes.
Adapt. Take the form of the
Yes.
container, right?
Yes. Pour
And
water into a cup, it takes the shape of a cup.
yeah,
Pour water in a glass. Yes.
it could crash. It could flow. Be water, my friend. Right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
it's just something so simple, you know,
yes, yes. And I
and
love
it
that. That is
works.
from
It
the Tao.
works.
That is from the Tao Te Ching, ancient book of Chinese wisdom, and it's one of my favorite books of antiquity. Like I said, I was raised Catholic,
Yeah.
so I'm familiar with the Bible. But
Yeah.
if I go to any book, it's the Tao Te Ching. Well, Stephen, we obviously have to do a part two because we barely scratched the surface here. And I say this with all of my guests in the conversations when it's like it's been over
Oh
an
my
hour
God, it's
and
been
we're
good.
just getting started. Thank you so
Right?
much,
It's getting rolling.
Stephen. And so
Yes.
for
Well, thank
people out
you.
there, if they want to get in touch with you, how can people in the world get in touch with Steve Keegan?
Okay. I think that's Instagram, right? At Steve
Yes.
Keegan 10, but there's a two there. It says 102. So
Okay, that's my mistake. Sorry about that.
okay. And
It's
then the
it's
email is right there.
yes,
SP Keegan 10 at
yes.
gmail.com.
Right.
or Instagram at Steve Keegan 10. It's not
Yes, it's not 102. That was
not
my
102.
mistake.
That's okay.
That's one of the editing. Okay, but anyway, I
But
will correct that in the show notes
yeah, no problem.
of the thing. So thank you once again, Stephen,
Yeah,
for
thank you,
joining us.
Cornell. I mean,
It's
we probably could talk for another several hours.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And like I said, there's
Yeah,
practically everyone that I've been in here in season two. I'm probably going to have to get them back on at a later date because the conversations are just getting started. And I try to keep it around an hour, because
yeah,
people have this limited attention spans. But thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen out
yeah.
there in podcast land, I thank you for joining us here on the Failure Guide podcast. And as always, I like to remind you, remember, life is not a race. Life is not a competition. If life is any sort of a race, it's a race we run only with ourselves. And the only thing we have to compare ourselves to is who we were yesterday. And remember to never quit. Keep running. And I will see you guys the next time.